When it comes to edge tools like chisels and plane blades, we refer to the two sides of the edge that has to be sharpened as the bevel side and the face side. When I get a new tool, I like to address the face side first because it's basically a one-time job. After the initial work that I do on the face, I should only need to maintain this side on my finest stone. To begin the process, I like to take a permanent magic marker and make a line or just kind of color in this edge. This is going to help me to determine the current state of the blade. Ideally, when we're done, we want this to be flat from side to side and front to back, at least for the first ½ inch or so. And sticking with our budget sharpening system for this part of the course, we're going to use sandpaper. So I'm just going to take a little bit of spray adhesive and spray it on my granite here. The nice thing about this stuff is it comes off easily with a little mineral spirits. I'm going to take 1/3 sheet and I'm going to start with 320 grit paper. If your blade is really bad, you can start with 220. If you find that it's not too bad, you can start even finer than 320. Ideally, you want the thinnest paper you can get. This wet dry is much thinner than the stuff that you typically find for sanding wood. The type with the sticky back or the grippy back on it, the paper itself tends to be a little thicker. And that can contribute to a little rounding over the edge. You just have to be a little bit more careful when you're working with that type of paper. But once we get up in grits and we get to the wet dry stuff, this is much, much thinner. And we won't see as much rounding over of the edge when we get to that. So we're going to start with the 320. And what I'm going to do is put the edge of the blade on the paper. And I like to go side to side, especially using sandpaper. Because if you go forward, there's a chance that you could buckle the paper in front of the blade. And if you do that, it's going to round over this edge. So instead, I prefer working side to side. And I'll do this for about 25 strokes or so. And my goal is to keep pressure right over the bevel of the blade. You can see how quickly this works. You can see all the steel particles building up. So it's good to take a brush every once in a while and brush those away. Now what you can see here is this blade is high in the middle and low on the side, so this is going to take a little bit of work. Ultimately, we want to get to a point where the blade looks like that and it's straight, nice and flat all the way across. So I'm going to have to continue to work on this blade a little bit longer. And make sure you're changing your paper often. You can see I've gone through almost 2 sheets of paper already, and I actually went back down to 220 for this blade because I've got an area here along the side that has really been problematic that I'm not getting down to. I may actually let this go because this is going to be a jack plane and this corner of the blade actually isn't going to be cutting anyway. So I may let that go, but I'll work on it for another couple minutes and see where I end up. All right, so I've been working on this blade for about 20 minutes. And I think we're going to let it go there. Again, this is going to be a blade for a jack plane, and we're going to end up cambering the edge of this blade, and the corner isn't actually going to be cutting in this plane, and we'll talk about that later. So I'm going to let that go. For the smooth plane blade, you can see nice and even scratch pattern from edge to edge. And I've gone through about 2 sheets of 220 grit paper. So now I'm going to move up through the grits. So that's 320. $400, $600, that's $800, 1500. And that's 2000. So after going up through the grits to 2000, we have a mirror polish on the back of the blade. It's flat from side to side and front to back because our reference is flat, and it's mirror polished. We'll never have to touch the back of this blade again, except to just polish the back on the highest grit each time we sharpen, but we won't have to go through all the grits on the face side of the blade again. This is a one-time job and it's done. You can see that I've gone through quite a bit of sandpaper, but most of it is still good. Other than the 220 and the 320 that I started out with that I wore out, the 400, 600, 800, 1500, and 2000 grit, they're still good enough to use for some more sharpening. So we'll put those aside and we'll use them later. So just to give you an idea, here's a good close-up. You can actually see my reflection in the blade. So it's mirror polished. So this blade is ready to go. We can now move on and address the bevel.